next one as well. I'd love to connect with you guys. Just a nice group of folks. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, if you think we're casual, go hang out with Matt.
No presentations, no agenda.
Okay, let's see. Oh, wait.
Bring your own beer.
This is my first time trying to do the slides from my phone. And then next up, we're also big fans of the High Desert Museum, and one of our co-organizers, Caroline's going to tell you all about it.
Yes, I love it. If you don't know
come
it.
in the camera.
If you don't know me, I volunteer at the High Desert Museum. I love everything about the High Desert Museum. I want more people to go to the High Desert Museum. If you want a free pass, hit me up on Discord. I have a few free passes, always happy to pass those along. So this month, on July 27th, they're going to do the big sawmill demonstration. If you've been to the High Desert Museum, they have the farm area in the back with this massive sawmill, and they're finally doing another demonstration. It is a sight to see, so if you're available that day, go check it out. And then also, there's a bed walk in August. So this is a guided twilight tour, starts at 8 p.m. You'll learn all about beds that we have here in Central Oregon, and then you get to go on a guided walk to try to find some beds. It is RSVP, and I believe about $5 per ticket, so you have to sign up for it, and please do so quickly. July bed walk sold out within just a few weeks, couple of weeks, so definitely go check it out. Woo!
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, I did the July Bat Walk, so that's my fault it sold out. It was awesome. I can't recommend it enough. It's nice, it's cool, and you have like such interesting and educational people to talk to up there. All right, next up, our usual pitch for trying to help people find jobs. Who's hiring? Am I the only one now?
Are you hiring? OSU Cascades always looking for adjunct.
There you go. Cool.
Every time I'm going to say it.
But yeah, if you want to come join my team at Coralogics and come work on a really cool installation and help take Datadog's lunch from them, come talk to me. All right. And then who's hiring for junior positions? All right. And who's looking for work? All right. Cool. Well, y'all saw who's looking and who's hiring, which I know it's a little bit of an imbalance right now, and hopefully that will continue to change. Yeah. All right. And then join our Discord. We do so much of this happens offline in the other rest of the month outside of this evening. So if you want to come join our Discord, here's just a quick QR code. Come scan it or come talk to me or any one of our organizers. We got Nathan over there, and you saw Caroline. Come talk to one of us, and we'd be happy to get you on the Discord.
There's a jobs channel in there.
And there's a jobs channel in there where you will see the job that I just posted, because I just posted it on yesterday. All right. Cool. And then our next meetup is going to be in one more month, and Danielle Heberling, who promises to be an amazing speaker, because Caroline always pulls in such awesome speakers. So can't wait to see that. And it's all about rethinking serverless. So come on back next month and RSVP on Meetup so that we know how much taco to get. All right, and I think that's all I have for you. So our first speaker is Nikita, who's out here from, oh goodness, it was Upwork?
Uptech.
Uptech. I am so
Studio,
sorry.
yeah.
And I actually first learned about Uptech when I was working at OSU, because you and some of your pals came out to go and talk at the career fair, and I was like, my mind was blown. I wanted to come work with you, but I didn't have the skills you were looking for, unfortunately. So I love that you're now coming out here to tell us more about it. So let's give it up for Nikita. Right here.
How do you get all
Yeah,
the
kind of
things?
Yeah.
Hi everyone. How I get all of this going? How do we share? How do I share to
Oh, it's a Chromecast.
Chromecast?
All right. Are you on Google Slides or on like Pages?
PowerPoint, like old school.
Oh, old school. Okay.
I know.
Okay. We're gonna have a brief technical interjection. All right.
Yeah. Maybe it's Andrew.
Okay. Free laptop.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's a little old though. I don't know if it'll be worth much on the black market.
We can do this for the Apple thing.
AirPlay?
Yeah, AirPlay. Yeah. Can you do AirPlay?
Probably.
All right.
I ain't done all Apple devices.
Yeah.
One of these days we're going to be so good.
No, one of them.
You think after a year we'd be more rehearsed at getting all the tech set up, right?
Tech setup is always out there.
AirPlay.
Usually you can just like share.
Right.
Like from the iPhone, it's just like an option.
Or maybe it's from PowerPoint.
For like sending
No. Slideshow. Let's see if
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Sort of the first phase of the game. Yeah, you don't it's
Almost there, I promise. Have another drink. Okay.
It's gotta be like YouTube.
AirPlay from PowerPoint. Clicking on the icon usually found in the top menu bar.
Yeah, do we have IT? You would think, but between a whole room of tech people that we could share a screen.
Maybe I need to switch it over.
Screen mirroring, that might be promising. Oh, here we go.
Boom, there we go. That's the 1 minute. See how it goes. Okay. Oh wait, now I gotta get it on here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Double check.
Come on. What do you think? Hello.
Oh, wait, is your phone overriding it? Maybe you can't exit.
Well, no, this is talking to you, so it shouldn't matter.
See how that goes.
There we go.
Hey, that's promising.
What's an Apple TV? I think that might be what we want.
I think that's the app, though.
Oh, like the...
It might be.
Do you have actual Apple TV in there, or are you just using?
No, I always get this wrong. I'll totally switch over.
Yeah,
Disappeared as an option.
And then transition to online.
There we go.
Yeah, that's my computer.
Ta-da. And
I will be in academia.
There we go.
okay, cool.
Okay, wait, now I gotta do Now we're gonna like
If you're already screen sharing, you could just present as is. It just won't. You're already there.
I need like the screen pass versus direct move.
Yeah.
See all of them.
Use a separate display.
Oh, display settings.
We do,
Well, there was one that says use a separate display.
Oh, where did I miss
Yeah,
it?
you missed
Oh,
it.
hold
Go
on.
back up to where it was. Screen mirroring.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Good eye. That's great.
Okay.
Sweet, easy.
Somebody's been working on it.
Yeah, can you tell? I'm in a new code base
There
today.
you go.
Pipelines are broken. Yay, there we go.
All right, one more time, Nikita. Uptech. All right, do you need someone to hit a button for you?
No, we can probably manage. I just want to feel like a chair or something like that. Not a big deal either. Like bar, still one chair. Yeah, let's do it. Present your podium.
We need like a whole fireside.
I know, right? Thank you. Thank you. That's perfect. Mouse over here. Just get my mouse back. Oh, perfect. Alright. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the intermission. My name is Nikita Rubocki. I'm going to start this with saying I'm still a little nasally from a whole bout of sickness I had 3 weeks ago. So if I have to blow my nose or cough, I promise it's just me and not you. That being said, my name is Nikita Rubocki. Like mentioned, I work for Uptech Studio. We are based out of California, but we do have an office here in Bend. We're a small company of 15 or so people, and we do mostly software consulting plus, work with a lot of early stage people, a lot of startups,
anywhere from like 0 users to I think our biggest client right now is like 10,000 plus. So kind of like in that space, we help augment teams that need more assistance, might need like certain levels of expertise. Some things we just build entirely from scratch. Some of the projects I'm in right now, we're actually just implementing the analytics for teams. So like they've already built the thing, but they need help implementing like phrase or amplitude, segment, mixed panel, if you've ever heard of any of those. But basically just, how do you measure the health of your app? That being said, I'm here today to talk about my journey in this space. I've been working for them for almost 2 years to the day. It was my first real job out of college. So I'm a little fresh, a little green, probably compared to some of the folks in the audience. But I first gave this presentation for a group of college students at OSU Cascades, and there were a couple of professors in the audience, such as Bijou over here. So this is going to be a repeat, rinse and repeat for him. But there were just a couple people who have been in this space for a few decades who came up to me after and were like, hey, some of the things you talked about were actually super useful and super interesting. And so I figured I would take this to this varied group where I'm assuming there's going to be people of all experience levels. So at any point, if you want to interject, please feel free to ask me questions. It's not going to get super technical, so you shouldn't have any questions. There's one line of code, but I'm pretty sure most people in this room can handle the one line you will see. And then other than that, yeah, just raise a hand if something comes up. Otherwise, we can chat at the end. It should only be about 20 minutes, half an hour, depending on how long I ramble in the story section. But that being said, let's embark on a journey. So just a quick little overview. I hope you brought your USB walking sticks and your sense of adventure, because we are going on a harrowing journey through the land of software development today. First, we're going to sail across the ocean of expectations and learn how to find our North Star when starting some projects. Then we're going to hike through the simple software plains, find some new ways to tackle projects and ideas. Swimming circles in Iteration Lake is going to teach us the beauty of process. We're going to meander through Mistake Meadow and learn how to tackle our mistakes with some humility. And then finally, we're going to scale the rocky sides of cloud deployment, where dangers and treasures alike will lead us. Come on. There we go. So one of the biggest and most consistent things I find in the 2 years I've been doing this now is that in any development work, and arguably life in general, is you are going to run into the ocean of expectations. Software development is an ever-changing discipline, and it can often feel like you're drowning in just the sheer number of languages, stacks, infrastructures. Especially at my company, we're constantly looking for the newest, latest things, right? How can we get stuff to people faster, cheaper, at still a high quality, right? Without having to go spin up an AWS server farm for a single founder, right? And so, not to mention, with all those decisions, again, in my line of work, you have the client expectation, right? And again, we're working with people who took out a loan, just dropped their job, might have taken trying to pay back friends, family. How do we get them real investment dollars and get them on their feet in this new project, without drowning ourselves? So the whole thing can be very overwhelming, is the TLDL of it. So how do you navigate it all? Like I said, seems like there's just never-ending list of stuff, never-ending task lists, and the problem is with the client, they expect things to be done quickly. They might not have the full technical expertise understanding to understand why this takes so long, or why we need to go down this archaic rabbit hole, or what the heck tech debt is and how to pay it off, right? And so these opposing forces can be hard to reconcile in the day-to-day of this job. Again, this is compounded by the fact that software is a very unstable landscape. You've got your, when you're starting off in a new project, you've got your tried and true, big behemoths, AWS, Azure. There's all these new, lightweight, fast, promising things out there now. If you've ever heard of, Supabase, we've got Heroku out there, Nitric, right? All these things. And then not to mention, there's new stuff coming out every single day, right? Is it worth adopting? Is it worth going through the learning curve? And how do you even know whether to make that decision or not? So with all of these options and all of these consequences for the path you choose, what is a simple developer to do? Especially when you're starting a new project with a client and you're supposed to be the excellent, the expert, the engineer, right? So this is an age-old question. I'm sure everyone has run up into this at some point in their job, whether it's tech-related or not. And although it's not inherent to software, I do feel like software feels it a little more keenly just because of its rapid iterative nature, right? Like it tends to change more than like architecture or something's gonna change. So this leads us to our first major discovery on our journey, the developer dogma, all in caps because it's always true, and that is that the software is always going to change. The requirements are going to change, the architecture will change, the design will change, the dependencies will change, sometimes on like a daily basis. I mean, every time I run like npm update, it's like, oh, there's new stuff that's already out of date, even though I just did this yesterday, right? So on and so forth. Fill in any noun you want with that, it's going to change. So my advice to this, at this point, and something I've had to learn in the 2 years I've been in this like rapid landscape, is to get super comfortable with this concept, right? There's a difference I've found, especially being like the youngest in my company and working with a lot of people who have been doing this, like I said, for like a couple decades. They started Uptech because they've been doing it for decades and wanted to do it the quote unquote right way, right? But there's still a difference between experience and assumptions, right? Are you holding fast to something because experience and your gut is telling you, oh, this is the right path? Or are you holding fast to assumptions because you're comfortable in this tech stack, you've done it a bunch of times, it's too hard to change, it's too hard of a learning curve and that type of thing. I find that those are two different opposing forces, and it's a fine line to walk, but the difference can mean, the difference in whether you can get something out the door in a week or get something out in like half a year, right? So I know all of this to start has sounded pretty demoralizing. I promise this picks up. Because who in their right mind is going to subscribe to this, right? We will, but that's okay. But if you never know what you're creating, and you never know if your creating is going to change or if it's going to be the right decision, how do you make good software that's going to meet or exceed your client expectations? Now, I don't have an answer right off the bat, but we've landed on the shore of our simple software planes. And so with that question in mind, let's continue our journey. So again, another one of the biggest lessons I've learned in like my real development years is the danger of over-optimizing too quickly, right? Something I like to quote often is this line by Sandy Metz, which is in its short version here, but the longer version goes more of, I would rather have duplicate code in the wrong design than optimized code in the wrong abstraction, right? I think, and as we all know, it is so incredibly easy to introduce complexity into software. That's like every developer who's ever had to hop into a system, make a system, go into a legacy system, you just like look at it and you're like, how did this go so wrong, right? How often, for instance, and I think, backing up, I think this is just a problem with human nature itself, right? Like how often do you find yourself, I'm just gonna like go clean out my closet, and then like hours later there's like stuff strewn, you found like some trophy from high school you haven't seen in ages, like some piece of clothing from like the 80s, you're like, I don't even know where this came from, some night in Vegas, right? And it turns into this bigger project. Or you are like, hey, I've got like this fun little like DIY project, it's just gonna be a Saturday afternoon, right? And then weeks go by, you've gone multiple trips to Lowe's, and you're like, it's still not actually done, like, whoops, like, I'm sorry if I'm bringing PTSD up for anyone, but we've all been there, right? Thank you, like, we got some laughs, like, you feel that inside, right? And so I think that software succumbs to that exact same fate, right? The human nature of leading to this unmanageable complexity where you start with the best of intentions and it just spirals. So what do you do about it? And what can we use to, combat these issues? So exploring this concept a little further, a little more concretely, when adding a new feature to an existing system after you go through all the bells and whistles of talking with the client, the designer, the PM, et cetera, right? I find that at the end of the day, you usually come down to one of two options. Unless you're just like the perfect developer and it just perfectly fits in the system and builds, and then in that case, like, you should be working at Google making millions. But that's not me. I run into issues all the time. New stuff comes in, how does it fit into the existing system? Chances are it doesn't always quite fit, but you can see like, just a little if statement here, or a new field on an object, or a new variable in a method, and like it will work, right? Like it will go, and just like a slight adjustment, and it's fine. And that might be fine for the short term, right? In my line of work, we often call these the special snowflake cases, right? You just build out your little edge case and you move on, your whole system happy, right? However, like snowflakes, people often say that you can't find the same one twice, or it's impossible to find the same one twice. And the same thing applies to your software system. If you're seeing a bunch of snowflakes happening in the same part of your code base, it probably means that it's no longer a special edge case, but the abstraction needs to be changed, and the underlying abstraction you started with is outdated and has outgrown its usefulness, right? So, in that case, what do? One of the things that I like to do is duplicate it. And I know duplication is so bad, right? I just told you that this change is going to be hard, and now I'm telling you that later you're going to have to make that change in 2 places, 3 places, 4 places, right? Now you're just multiplying your change across. And I get that, right? I totally agree. If you're doing duplication the wrong way, you're just like quite literally exponentially increasing your mess, right? You have to make one change, suddenly that field is changing across your entire code base. However, I like to say that duplication within reason can actually be a good way to optimize that code base. As we learned earlier, the software is always going to change. And unfortunately, it's impossible to know all of that up front, right? We run into this all the time. You get a client, they have this great idea in their head, and then you present them with the thing they told you, and they're like, that is absolutely not what I meant at all, right? But that's what they told you. So how do you reconcile those things where it's impossible to know what they're actually going to want when it hits the real life and they can have it in their hands? So what I like to do is start with just a bit of duplication, right? Instead of going through and making all these classes and these methods and these services. Again, if you're experienced and you've been doing it for a while and you're like, this is just a basic API and this tech stack I'm familiar, I know I'm going to need X, Y, Z. To a degree, that's probably true. But in some cases, I would like to challenge and say, hey, what if like on this new thing, we just duplicate it instead of like deciding this is what the abstraction is before we really know? And then, almost like magic, with enough of those duplications, you're going to start to see where the similarities are. And those similarities are going to naturally expose themselves as the right abstraction. And then you can pull out the abstraction, clean up your duplication, refactor, and you will be set with the right thing instead of, again, like we said, the wrong abstraction in that design.
You also have the advantage if they decide they don't want the feature, it's easy to throw away.
Exactly, right? I always, we were talking a bit about Jan Bakos in my earlier conversation. One of the things he taught us originally when I was going through my classes is we would do like the greenest implementation possible, which like as engineers, as brilliant people, were like, but it can be so much cooler and better and smarter. But I remember we just had one where it was like print the lyrics to a song, and everyone was making these methods and these parsers, and it was literally, the goal of it was just copy, paste, print, right? Which is horrible, like it makes you cringe, it's just a block of paragraph. But like that was the easiest implementation, and if it never changed, it would work, right? And so that's kind of what like this idea is getting at. So thank you for that. And to that degree, and kind of what I just said, we've discovered some remedies to this code rot and to battle this complexity. So when you're adding code into the system, look to see if the change is easy. If it is, just make that change. Done, right? However, if you're pushing too hard, right, kind of like square into the circle hole and it's not quite fitting and it's getting more complicated and you can't quite write the test to get it to run, then it's probably time to figure out what the new abstraction is. A little bit of duplication, a little bit of letting that abstraction come out of the system. And that way I think programming is like an art, right? Like if you let it, it will come to you. So instead of putting in the new feature immediately, with that new feature in mind, update the system, pull out the abstraction, and then you will suddenly find that we're back to the other one. The change is suddenly easy to make. So the point here is not that it's like one or the other, right? Again, it's that constant push and pull between like new all the time, and then like, I want to pay off the tech debt, I want it to be perfect. But rather these things go hand in hand. If the change is easy, do that. If it's not, make the abstraction. Rinse, repeat as necessary. Now, come on. Speaking of the repetition, we've arrived at iteration link. So we've learned so far, software is always changing, and we have one tool to potentially combat that complexity. However, there's more to software than just building the software itself, right? You gotta work with design, you gotta build the thing, you gotta get it out into the world. How do you manage all that complexity? Again, if it's constantly changing, and if it's constantly changing, it's never quite done, right? Where do you draw that line and start putting stuff out into the world? So I'm gonna follow that question with another question, which is what is the best way to cross a lake where you can't even see the other side, right? The answer would be one stroke at a time. Software is the exact same way. I mentioned at the beginning, our running task list feels infinite, and a lot of times it usually is. However, the tasks themselves making up those lists are very finite, right? You can break the task down until it's manageable, testable, and can have like a clean, done, this is the finish line. If the problem does not have a clean finish line or it's not testable, break it down further until you hit that point, right? Complexity is the death of speed. To accomplish anything, you gotta learn how to break it down. And there's like a million paradigms, you've heard it all, agile, extreme programming, do 2 weeks, do the tickets, do the sprint. And however you wanna spin it, the basis is always the same, right? Take a problem, break it down until it's manageable, and then iterate on that. In my company, we tend to do, on the internal project I'm on right now, we have like a consistent build release every other week. We have a Jira board that breaks things down into epics, which could be like a month or two. Epics are full of stories, which are more like a couple weeks, and then stories are full of features, which are days, right? And so by breaking all of those problems down, we have something that might not be done for a couple months, but in progress of that goal, you can check off one little thing at a time. So not only does this guarantee that we're gonna have a consistent release, a consistent new stuff for users, but it also just keeps team morale up, right? Because people hate having lingering to-dos, and people love crossing off a ticket and saying, that's out in the world now, right? So, like most things in life, when the problem feels too big, break it down into its smaller pieces. So after finishing our swim, we notice another new tool for our tool belt, which is the deployment rope. By following these steps and iterating on them in short loops, again, if you or your company applies one of the paradigms, that's okay, but all of it comes down to basically, right, design it, build it, test it, repeat. And keep breaking it down until you can do this. At that point, you will take that infinite thing off into the distance and make concrete steps towards the progress. So now we get to Mistake Meadow, because despite our best efforts and me on my pedestal saying all the great ways to write software, you're gonna make mistakes, right? You can try to write the most beautiful, clean, perfect looped code that you can, and there's always gonna be something that comes up. We're all human, and therefore all inherently flawed, and so the software we make, exact same way. Unfortunately, I don't have any magical tools for that. Instead, I figured we've been journeying for a bit now, so we're gonna sit by the campfire, and I'll tell you a couple stories from my experience at work where this has come in. One of the more famous stories at my company is the infamous teapot error. The partners who started Uptech Studio, a lot of them used to work for Acorns. If you've ever seen it, like the little stock app, right, you can get started with just like $5, right? So a lot of them used to work for Acorns, and Acorns is like pretty big, right? Like even when they were there, it's pretty big, a lot of users, a lot of publicity. And they were on the dev team, and they were building out, whatever, a new service, and they're building out the air handling for it, and they came to an error case that was impossible to hit, right? And I can see, on your faces, you can probably know where this is going. Could never ever be hit. They tossed in like just a little funny like developer joke. They're like, this is going to be the teapot error, right? I don't know why teapot, but they tossed it in there. And then forget about it. Weeks later, you push it to production, and then suddenly, to thousands of users, they're getting a push notification, and all it says is teapot error. Yes, correct. So this impossible, never could be hit error is suddenly being broadcast to like thousands of their users, right? Because some service somewhere had gone down, didn't get the right credentials it needed, and so was tossing this error out, right? Someone forgot to like spin up the thing it actually required. So that's like a very good example. Personal example, like about a month ago, we were implementing, the project I'm working on requires like an event stream, right? So we were implementing a new version of this event stream in Amazon called Kinesis, and basically we're just spinning up some lambdas to grab the events in the batches that they come in, process them, put them into our databases, right? And me and another developer who were working on this, we had it all set up, it was mostly working, we were running test batches of events of 1,000, and we kept only getting like 500 to 600, right? Like consistently. It was never the same number, but it was always like in that range. And we were like, why, like where are these events going, right? Like we combed through everything in that system, line by line, added all the logging, error handling, like out the wazoo, right? Just like so many logs, so many things, kept running this test over and over, and just could not find these missing events. Like they were just nowhere to be found. It was the point where we had spent like, not like full weeks, but like a lot of time over multiple weeks, like trying to figure this out. And to the point where we were like about to call Amazon services, like upgrade our tier to get the support level. And then as like a final thing, I was going through like one more time, just adding like literally every log you could think of, just like line by line. And I find that our for loop, which is supposed to be processing the batch, right? Every event in the batch has a return statement in it. So the loop is only going once for every batch of events, right? Which is why we're not missing, thank you, yes. So it's why, in this code.
I've never done that.
Never, right? Yeah.
First time.
Every return statement, perfectly where it belongs. No, so this literally the whole thing, weeks and weeks of work and logs and errors, was one little return
Is this
statement.
an indentation thing in Python?
No, we're actually in TypeScript, so it was literally just like a, we didn't even need a return statement because it was a void function. So like the whole thing was unnecessary to begin with, but it was just cutting the loop off. So like most of the events would go through, but it wasn't actually batching. So those are just a couple fun stories from my time. I'm sure at the end, if anyone has ones they want to share, we can do that. But the point is that's going to happen, right? Mistakes will be made, and yet we will live to tell the tale. So nestled among the coals the next morning, we wake up refreshed, bright, lovely. We find a traveling companion with a keen ear. So as we have all heard, as we all know, mistakes are the best place for growth. So though I don't have any remedy for not making the mistake in the first place, I have found a couple questions that I like to ask when they do happen that can help prevent them in the future. The first one being, what caused the error in the first place? Now this seems super simple, but the problem is you need to keep iterating on that question until you find like an actionable item. Not just like, hey, Chad over there pushed a commit without approval. And you're like, okay, yeah, dang it, Chad. But okay, like if Chad was able to do that, like why, right? Like do we not have the right hooks in place? Do we not have the right pipeline running the right checks, right? Like do we not have the right permissions, right? Like least privileged permissions, whatever way you want to spin it, right? And that's related to the second question, which is what guardrails can be put in place to prevent it in the future? One of my favorite stories, I can't remember where I heard it, what company, and just probably some article online, but there was a development team that had interns, and on the very first day, for all these interns, they would get used to the dev environment, and they would have them make a commit and push it into their main pipeline, right? Like this big system with like real people using it. And you know, as the story goes, some developer came to like the lead guy who's running all this, and they're like, how are you just having interns like push stuff, right? Like they're green, they don't know anything, what if they break it? And to which this lead developer responds, if an intern can come in and push a commit while supervised that breaks the whole system, then like we haven't done the right job implementing the system, right? Yes, thank you. And I love that story because it puts the onus on the system and the things you can put in place, right? Like humans are fallible and the infrastructure we're putting in is incredibly complicated. So how can you build a system to prevent those things? You know, put the guardrails up on the bowling alley, get those strikes, right? So after that, we're a big testing, we believe in tests at my company, so, you know, are there tests you could put to prevent this thing in the future? That's kind of more for like logical errors, right? If something slips in, can you put a test to prevent it from happening again? And then my fourth and final, that I think is overlooked a lot, but that I have found personally super useful, is should there be better documentation about this in the future? One of the things we do for my current project is we have like, it's an internal one, so a lot of devs are like constantly kind of cycling in and out of it because when we get like paying clients, we obviously prioritize that than burning money on our internal project. And so there's people have a lot of the context knowledge, but they're constantly moving in and out of it, right? And because it's a system out in the world, it breaks down sometimes, and the person who knows how to fix it might not be on the project right now, or maybe even they only fixed it like a few months ago, the steps are hazy. And so what we've started doing is keeping a running document of just like problems that you might see in like the K8s clusters or like whatever it is, right? And it's just like quick, short description. Here's the problem, here's the error you're probably seeing, and here's a potential solution, right? Of just like random archaic steps that you would never think to go through by yourself. And that's been a super useful way for one, just even if you're the one who solved it the first time, remembering, because again, it doesn't happen often, but it gives you enough time where it's like, what did I quite do? And then it also enables new developers or developers who haven't been in there for a while to get into it and be able to solve it on their own without having to like go pester someone about it, right? So those are the only things I can give you for mistakes, but you know, I think they're pretty good questions. So now we have finally made it to mount deployment. This is going to be our final hurdle before finding our treasure, right? So putting software out into the world can be a very intimidating act, right? Not only do you have to maintain your code bases, once they're there, you have to maintain the infrastructure. There's like a million different things to worry about, keep going, and you have to make sure your software's up and available. And then the worst thing is, if it's successful, you're gonna have real users, and real users have usually not a lot of patience and a lot of opinions, right? So how do you like manage all of that?
And they do crazy things.
Yeah, like they'll do stuff that you never thought anyone should do in the system, and they will find a way. We've seen it happen time and time again. So, but luckily, we have a couple things in our toolkit now to help us scale our software, put it out into the world. And though I will be the first to say that this is not at all comprehensive, and I'm sure there's plenty of things we can all add to it, I like to think that it is a good way to at least start, right? By knowing the software is going to change and making yourself remain flexible, you can then change the software to the shifting needs of whatever it is, external pressures, the client, internal, whatnot, right? And it will be through proper design and quick, digestible iterations, right? So you're not just like shoving a ton of code out in the world and then being like, oh, we don't know which part broke because there's like 10 features in here, right? More importantly, when you do get stuck, you can lean on your team and your community because we've all been there when mistakes have been made, and most of us in here still have our jobs, right? If you have a tale where you lost your job, I'd love to hear it, but so far, at least I have not personally been fired or harassed for any of the big mistakes I've made. So with these ideas in mind, you can tame this big, horrible, complicated beast of complexity into a nicer, calmer, more enjoyable even code base, I know. This doesn't mean the software is always going to remain tame, but now we have a couple of tools and maybe just a little bit of magic touch to do it. And here's our one line of code. I told you it wouldn't be scary.
Trigger warning.
I know, trigger warning. This is it though, that's the only line in this whole part. So now with our newfound experience and our amazing dragon taming abilities, we have found our treasure. Value-based software. So by asking the right questions around the important features, by implementing good design and abstraction, by keeping your tasks small, you will be able to deliver software that is good and valuable to your users. Because if it doesn't solve a problem or fix a need or even just, solve an irritation they have, in other words, provide value, then like what is even the point, right? Unless you just want to code in your own little void. But in my opinion, bringing out stuff that people are like, wow, this app like changed the way I viewed this and this is like so much better is like the reason I like to program. So though a long and demanding journey, it is a rewarding one if you are willing to make the trek. Thank you. I'll open it to questions or stories, or if anyone wants to add anything. I know we're right at half an hour, so I don't want to take away from your time.
That's great. Fantastic.
Going once.
I could say that when back in the day at Activision, when we were still shipping stuff on DVDs, the way the defects count went was during development, it was like a few hundred defects. and then we hired all the high schoolers with pizza and soda, and then it was like thousands of defects. They came all so fast, and what you were saying made me think of this, because there have been a bunch of times that I've seen something weird happen, and then you try to repro it, and it doesn't repro, and you give up, but you know that you're going to show this to like 1 million people, and if you can only see the defect one time in 10,000, that's a lot of people who are going to see the defect at the end of the day. And so I always wondered with those games that we shipped, because they went out the door with still hundreds of defects that I cannot reproduce.
Yeah, you're like, what happened?
How many of the hundreds of thousands, millions of people that bought the games
Yep.
saw weird stuff happen. But
Well, no one's mobbed you yet, right? So
yeah.
just lynches at the house.
Yeah. I mean, they did say the game was crap.
A BBS.
Yeah. It was the crap game was X-Men, the official game.
Oh, nice.
The movie game for X-Men. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
Who's part of your party as you go on your adventure? Who's part of your crew?
That's a great quote. It's how you communicate together to make it through this landscape is how at least Uptech tends to get software out into the world. And then, I would argue that, like any good video game, there's always those people there to help you on like the side quests and stuff. Because we are such a small company, everyone always knows everyone else, so if there's like a niche problem or someone with more expertise in the domain that might just not be on the project, you always have people you can ask. And then, the greater at large Discord communities like this one, and the various like open source languages and platforms out there where you can just like, even Stack Overflow, although it can get a little aggressive sometimes, but post your stuff and someone somewhere probably has the answer, or is at least willing to like sit in the mud with you while you both figure it out. So yeah, good question.
It sounds like the engineers on your team, are you all specialized, or you kind of do everything?
It's a bit of a mix. So I'm like so junior that when I didn't like have a specialty. I just came out of college and I was like, I've worked for a company a little bit, like I can make a pull request. So they just tossed me into a lane, like into TypeScript and Nest.js more specifically. And I was like, I've never done this before, but like I'll just learn. And that's kind of been my personal journey. Like even as recently as last week, I got put on a project that's only a couple weeks that they're doing like PHP and Laravel. I don't even know how to say it yet. Yeah, but I like literally just learned this framework in like the last 2 working days, and like putting events into their system for them because they're on a crunch deadline and didn't have time to get analytics in. So I wouldn't say I technically have a specialty yet. I also do a lot of Flutter. There are definitely some devs who have been doing this for a while. Like we're a big Flutter company, so we have a couple devs that have been like big Flutter, and like one of them's even giving a talk at like the big Flutter annual Flutter conference in like Peru or something. So we got like a couple of people who kind of have that expertise, a couple of people who do like more like iOS, like a little more iOS, like Swift specialty. But it kind of just depends. Like in general, the expectation is like unless, if there's someone better to do the job, they will do it. But like if there is a new thing, or someone wants to try this, or if like you even have something you want to try, like you're responsible and you can, spin it up, learn it, figure it out, right?
Cool. Yeah, maybe germane to this group, like, do the engineers also do the operations?
Like DevOps stuff?
Do you do the deployments and like, I don't know, are you on call?
Yeah, so yes, it depends on the project. So a lot of clients sometimes, in general, will have like their own kind of like infrastructure team or like DevOps team. I'd say the majority of our clients are like that. Like we'll be working like with their DevOps to be like, hey, like we need to provision this, or like we need access to this, or whatever. In the internal project that I've been working on until more recently, like we manage all of that, so I'm like half a DevOps engineer. I do like all our code deployments in AWS and like, provision it to Apple and Google, so You know, we're not the most efficient system by any means. There's definitely like, it's kind of an older architecture, speaking of always changing. But yeah, so I'd say it just depends. I mean, people definitely know like a baseline. I wouldn't say anyone's like, you know, AWS certified expert, you know, engineer, but we did get the gist of it.
I think it's really nice that, you know, it sounds like y'all just kind of pick up what you need to do. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. There's very, I mean, you know, we like have enough where we can kind of like pick if there's like a project that's clearly like bad or not going to work, right? But in general, we tend to be like pretty open, and some of our more recent initiatives are like, again, to like that super, super early stage founder. Like we've got like a low code, no code initiative where it's like, I don't know if anyone's ever played around with like Flutterflow or any of those like kind of low code options, but it's where we basically like have like a super cheap option where you get like a dev who will work part-time to kind of do like the more technical stuff, but it's like it's, you know, it's not like something that's like supposed to scale to enterprise level, but it is enough to be like, hey, investors or pitch competition, like here's a thing and it works and you could like download it and it's like beta, and then hopefully get them the money to be like, all right, now let's like get a real team, put some real infrastructure behind it, that type of thing. So we've been doing a lot of that more recently. Yep.
Sweet.
Absolutely. Well, I'll just cede the floor. But ping me, or I'm on Discord, chat with me after, I'm around. Thank you.
Oh, you were going to jump up. We usually like to take a little bit of a break. Unless you want.
Everyone's.
All right.
You might just need a time.
Well, now you can get set up. All right, cool. We're going to take just a quick 10-15 minutes, give you a chance to go and refill your drinks and grab another cookie because there's not a whole lot of tacos left, but please
That was like all in Acorn.
have something.
Like
We'll see you again in a minute.
There's an April Fool's Day called Coffee Over HTTP.
Oh, really?
And there's an error code called
That's hilarious.
Is that,
Oh my gosh, that is funny. Refuse to brew coffee.
It was
That's
a
funny.
it's April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day from, I think it said 1998.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're finding April Fool's jokes in 1998.
Wonder if they
That's
like
hilarious.
revived it for like.
Yeah, I wonder if it was, maybe that's like part of like why, you know, because I mean, it's 1998.
Well, you know, it was the 90s. Everybody was funny.
I agree. I like trying to put even like today, like, you know, a couple of Easter eggs, like in things, like if you just end up off some arcane path, you don't know how you got here, but you know.
Greetings, fellow traveler. It's dangerous to go out
Yes,
alone.
exactly.
I remember there's some movement to like try to get rid of that error code, and like a bunch of people like,
No.
we gotta keep it.
No, it's fine, right? Like, yeah.
Nobody uses it, but there's no reason to
Yeah,
get rid of it.
Exactly. Or if you just for kicks, right?
Exactly. Just look at the amount of delight in people's faces when we talk about it.
Yeah, it's just
It's a
fun.
reminder of our
HTTP.
it's
Yeah.
a reminder of our shady history of internet.
Yeah, just weird nerds with weird sense of humor, right?
Yeah, I mean, look at Wit, you know?
No.
I love it.
I'm trying to
Weird nerds with weird senses of humor.
go by me.
Tell him to say hello to his own self, you know? He's got my number.
I just happened to see it.
Wow.
My buddy Josh.
Nice to meet you.
For ages. We
Cool. All right.
we used to go to the.
Thank you again so much.
Anytime.
I can't remember. Yeah. There was a meetup like 10 years ago.
Oh, wait. Is that yours or mine?
I'll watch. That's pretty good. I haven't done anything since COVID. Come to this meetup.
Well, I was inspired by some of this. And that's just so cool.
A while ago, then I could show you.
Good, how are you? I do actually that for quite some time. I know that everyone else here, he invited me along, so I'll check it out. I am, yes. What's that? I made a donation to offset the part of. Okay, I was gonna say dumb it down. Nice. Okay, so you're doing your AI. Are you white hat? Or you kind of do a little bit? Is that like I'm also part of the That sounds fun. Let's do I'll forget what it was called. Let's do a pilot. That's probably it, yeah. And last time I gave one of these, it's pretty safe. Like that's stuff that the layperson's like, oh wow, we got it. So you get the one Jerry right here time. Turns out they have an event actually. It's a whole different. That's cool. Yeah, that sounds good. Alright. So yeah, I grew up here, left and lived for a while. Went back to
Yeah, I barely know how to Oh, Westview, okay.
Very
the last place I lived, I was like in Southeast right now.
But yeah, so it's like the located for a while. You're doing
Most people do the same word. It's like, yeah, it's the whole thing. There's this like 10 small towns that encompass one space. Because if you just do pick and drop it, it's really small.
Yeah, that's a cool spot.
What brought you up to that? Life? Cool. Yeah, very cool. What's she doing there?
Growing.
Velocity.
I certainly have had some interesting AI.
Oh, super. That sounds fun. Yeah, that's cool.
Like the last one.
No, just a couple years later.
I want to know more about it.
Okay, so you
Maybe we're going to until it gets back to my I have my
An opinion. They're live in opinion. It's called
No, I've never story. 2019. Yeah, it is. It's about fortunately, I mean, since we're all legislated,
Exactly, right?
Open the window.
Yeah, man. All right, cool. What's up, everybody? Ready to get going again? All right. This
have a beer.
yeah,
I forgot.
because it is Cloud Beers, right?
It's AI, and this one's sponsored by Cloud Beers, so please make sure you have a beer.
Well, I don't drink, so I'm having booch, which is the next best thing. So
On-premise
here we go.
kombucha. Cheers.
On-premise kombucha. OPK. There you go. You gotta like
You're
short
right.
everything.
I need acronyms.
All right, cool. All right, so real quick flashback. I encourage everybody to go look up HTTP status code 418 in your own time. If you know what it is, you're already laughing. Great. Anyway, Matt's going to come talk to us about, I don't know, smart computers and shit, right? You know, are they going to take over? Are they going to steal your gerbs? Or are they actually going to be helpful to us? Are they going to be helpful to the wealthiest organizations in the world? What do you want to tell us about, Matt?
Should you trust it? I
Should
don't
you
know.
trust it?
Cheers. Thank you, Brian.
All you.
No, it's awesome to come out here and thank you, and that was a really awesome presentation from.
Nikita's back there.
Oh, there she is. Thank you, Nikita. That was fantastic. I was just telling Brian over here, I was a little bit sad because you were talking about fallible humans and infallible systems. Well, now we're going to be talking about fallible systems. So, this would be a fun conversation. I've been in Bend for 10, 11 years now. I run a local meetup group called Cloud Beers. We just get together to talk about cloud stuff and technology stuff in general at this point. I'm kind of sick of both cloud and beer at this point, frankly. But it's been a fun little social meetup. Check us out on a LinkedIn page. It's a monthly rotation. And come out and follow. No need to RSVP, just show up if you can make it. I've been in the cloud space for about 15 years, about since the time it started. Worked for a company called RightScale way back in the day, which was the very first cloud management platform. So just kind of been in and around the tech industry for a while. Now I'm a consultant, mattasmall.com. Check me out on LinkedIn, email me, and you can see the theme. I help small startups primarily figure out how to take their products to market, figure out how to sell them, figure out how to support customers, support their revenue operations. I also consult on cloud and AI implementations. Beyond that, my startup here in Bend, Lucid Cradle, with my wife. My wife runs one of the very first psilocybin service centers here in Bend, Oregon. We've been open since September, so check that out, lucidcradle.com. Stable Pathways Group is my sister company. We provide destination management services for the out-of-towners that are coming in to experience magic mushrooms. We take care of all the rest of their logistics for them while they're here. Ben Guys for Good is a philanthropy group. Please, thank you, Jed, for coming out tonight. Another good guy, Ben. Many of you would love to see you out there. There's also Ben Professional Women for Good. What this is a giving circle. We just get together for the express purpose of raising some money and donating it to a local nonprofit. We get together, have a good time, and chat about good things. It's not all tech all the time, which is kind of refreshing.
Cloud Beers talked about it, and Quai. This is how I got into the AI world. Quai is an open source AI, a nonprofit open source AI lab, building a personal AI operating system. And I'm actually going to start there. Our premise at Quai is that you need to own your own AI. The big services are working against you, and this technology is really going to only enable all of us is if we can run it ourselves on our own retained private data. And so that's really what a personal AI operating system is all about. We need to look at how do we interchange the parts of that with new models, new technologies, new interfaces, new data. And so that's really the problems that we're trying to solve in development. We're also trying to figure out how to make this run cheaply for everybody. So one of the projects right now we're looking at is trying to figure out a distributed community inference engine. If you don't have enough compute capacity to run a query, an AI query on your own device, maybe a community of trusted providers can help you. So there's a lot of exploration of how can we actually democratize this and using this in the actual word of giving everybody a vote as to where this thing's going. Check out, if you're traveling around, we're doing some hackathons all across the country this summer. PyPalooza, check it out, pypalooza.com. Austin, there's one in Seattle coming up next month, a bunch of stuff happening. Just get together people to hack on this stuff.
Are you going to have one here, Matt?
Hey, if we can get a sponsor, we can definitely bring a PyPalooza to Bend, OSU. Want to sponsor? Let's bring some cool AI thinkers.
Aren't here, but I'm sure they'd love to talk with you.
We are developing actually a beta program. We're in a beta program right now for colleges and universities. Developing, these are RAG bots. I'll talk a little bit about what that means, but developing what it could look like to have virtual teachers assistants, supporting teachers and or students, and or how does that actually get implemented, who's that good for and why. Final plug here, check us out Fridays, 10 a.m. Pacific. That's our weekly public meeting on Google Meet. Just go to quai.ai. You can add the invite to your calendar. It's Google Meet, show up. It's usually about 40, 50 of us talking about AI stuff. There's cool lightning talks and just a great community to get involved with. So as I started learning a lot about artificial intelligence, I had to take a step back and start learning a lot more about intelligence, because it turns out we don't have great definitions of that. Mathematicians like to think, hey, this is all about pattern recognition. Computer scientists like to ascribe human-like qualities to those things. But as we go around the spectrum, there are so many perspectives on what intelligence actually is. And the important thing just to remember here as we go forward in artificial intelligence is that us tech folk in the room don't have the monopoly on what that actually means. Let's all take a broader perspective. Let's take some broader opinions about what intelligence can mean before we start going and defining and operationalizing all of those various and optimizing all of those things, like we know we love to do. So what is artificial intelligence? Well, some people can refer to it as a stochastic parrot. I heard somebody refer to it as a stochastic slot machine. That was kind of a cool idea. So that was kind of Zoltan there. Artificial intelligence, really simply put, is a utility service for information. I'm not talking about the veracity of the information or the trustworthiness of the information, but it produces information. And rule 1 of the internet applies: if you're not paying for it, you're the product. Please just remember that. This does not apply to the companies that are not paying for it and building the products. I will simply say to that these systems would not be nearly as capable if they were properly licensed. AI refers to now primarily generative AI, but that's really just the kernel of a whole lot of concentric circles of research that has been going on for years and years and years and years. Ask any AI researcher that's been involved in this for the past 10, and they will hang their head in sadness as to how a lot of the things have been bastardized and changed. Just remember that there's a lot in this, and so-called AI experts, or myself included, we might know little pieces of this, but there's a broad puzzle here. The two that I tend to pay attention to, classifier AI and generative AI. Classifier AI is just the concept of take a lot of data and figure out what you're looking for and try to find that. So a good example of a classifier AI or discriminator AI would be searching for cancer screening, lung cancer screenings out of lung cancer scan images. So we know what that looks like. A bunch of doctors have labeled that. Yep, that's cancer. No, that's not cancer. And we can put that all through a funnel and send a bunch of images through and try to find the cancer. Generative AI takes a thin input, meaning very little input. I can say, hey, ChatGPT, write me 1,000 words, and it will write 1,000 words. Which 1,000 words it's going to suggest. So it takes a thin input, does some calculations, predicts some next tokens, and blasts out a big fat output for you. And that's kind of just changing the model a little bit. Those two popular types here, large language models, these are text, these guess the next text token, and diffusion models, these guess the next pixel over to generate an image. These language models, you know, I like to think, you know, hey, if I ask you all, hey, describe the sky is cloudy out here. Oh, gosh. All right, I'm trying. Sky is blue. Thank you. Yeah, predictable answer to that. If you ask a mountain of information, the answer to the sky is, the next likely prediction is going to be blue. And that's how these large language models come up with their eloquence. Diffusion models actually work really kind of an interesting way here. They take a bunch of images and then they start adding noise to them, adding noise, adding noise, adding noise, adding noise, until it's all noise. And then they have a bunch of data that's all noised up photos, and you ask it, that bunch of data is all noised up photos, and then they reverse the process. Give me a statue, and it denoises a statue out of all the noise. So guessing the next best pixel out of having fuzzed up a bunch of other images. A hosted language model service, you know, tends to look like this. A user will be interacting with a service. You know, those services are hosted. You don't control any of that on your local machine. Ask a prompt. You know, there'll be, you know, some type of interface to that system. The language model kind of sits in the middle of that with, you know, maybe a text-based interface, chatbot, talking head. They'll have, you know, a place for you to put some data, upload a document. And they'll likely connect to some services. You know, Microsoft, for example, connects to all the, you know, Microsoft services in the back end. When you have a request, you ask a prompt. That might wash through some user custom instructions. You can say things like, hey, talk to me like I'm in 11th grade, not 5-year-old. And it will try to modify your responses that way. Then it washes through another layer, the system prompt. And you know, the system prompt is what you can actually, these things leak all the time from OpenAI. It's basically what they tell GPT, the language model, how to behave as ChatGPT. They say, you are ChatGPT, today's date is nah, here's how you should respond to users. That's when you get your response. The user can control the prompt. You can control some of your custom settings. You can upload data, but you can't actually control what they're doing with it in a hosted service. You can maybe be able to control some of the connected services, but some of them are going to be controlled by that provider as well. And you can never control the system prompt. And those system prompts actually include instructions like rewrite the prompt if. So what you should just remember in all of this is whatever you say isn't necessarily what comes back. It's been modified and it's been changed. And there's two places that can be introduced. It can either be introduced in what's referred to as the bias of the training data, meaning we took a mountain of data and it's finding the average in it, and the average looks like this. If I ask a language model, how do I grow corn, it's not going to give me any information about how a Native American grows corn, you know, how natural farming practices would be delivered. I asked an open-ended enough question, I'm going to get the most average way to grow corn, likely a factory farm. So just remember this as your, and then excuse me, the other bias here that gets introduced is just how the company tells it to behave. And this is where you were getting some of the comical experiences like, generate me the founding fathers, and they were, you know, black and Native American in the output images and things like that. That was the system prompt, the guardrails that they were trying to put on those generations behaving in different ways. There's lots of services out there. I'm going to cover just a few of them to kind of give you a taste of some of the different providers and what they're working on. There's, of course, OpenAI. They're working on foundation models. These are big, giant models. These are the ones that take 10, 20, 50, $100 million to train. The CEO of Anthropic was just talking about, oh, the next ones are going to be $100 billion to train. It's weird. OpenAI is building those foundation models. Those are the GPT model, GPT-4o being the most recent. They're also building the ChatGPT interface to that, the chatbot interface, as well as innovating in agentic engineering. They call these GPTs. They didn't get that trademark, but they're actually they're actually going out and having all of you create these wonderful little agents, these wonderful little GPT agents that are specialized in different areas, so they can figure out where they need to shore up their major model behind the scenes. So while they're out to define the future of AI systems, they're also trying to develop AGI with the stated goal of outcompeting half of us economically. So whenever you give a prompt or your data to OpenAI, just remember that that's the fuel that you're giving to that fire. Meta is a social media company. They are primarily trying to integrate AI into all their features and services and chatbots, and they have WhatsApp and they have Instagram and they have all this stuff, and now you can actually see, oh, chat with the MetaBot, chat with this. They're also developing foundation models. Llama is their foundation model. We're up to Llama 3. And they're calling those open source. Now, this is a nice cover their ass because it's a liability play. Hey, we're just putting tools out there. If people use these tools in the wrong way, well, the tools were just out there. So, they're not trying to take the liability for the things that people do with AI, like OpenAI may have to do, because they're not sharing any of the model behind the scenes. Meta's trying to throw it out there and saying, hey, the model's open source, so it's out in the community. It's also not open source. Open source means that you can independently recreate something. You have all the component pieces. Meta does not tell you the training data, and they do not tell you the weights, which we'll get into a little bit later, how the statistics are kind of tipped in the balance. They're also just trying to monetize your personal data, so just remember that. Everything you upload to Meta is theirs. Artists have been dealing with this for years. They scrape the ability for an artist to copyright anything they upload up to Meta years and years and years ago, before all of this came about. Mistral, they're the darling of the EU, also developing foundation models, kind of small, scrappy team, trying to be that, real, hey, we're all pure tech for, tech is good's sake. They're kind of ignoring a lot of the ethical challenges of open sourcing those models and what they're putting out into the world. So that would be my criticism generally of Mistral. Midjourney, diffusion model leader. They have no shame in terms of allowing you to appropriate another artist's style, imagery, otherwise. So you can ask Midjourney for just about anything. They've been getting in hot water for this now, but we'll see how that actually plays out in the legal systems. Google, they're building foundation models, Gemini, and just recently Gemma, which is a smaller model designed for mobile phones. I actually have one of the new Pixel 8s with Gemini Nano on it, if they would let me into the beta. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to shrink this stuff down and put this everywhere. Really, their mission is organizing all the data in the world, and that's primarily what they think AI needs to be able to help them do. And if you've asked Google, well, if you searched on Google recently and encountered AI answers, you can kind of get a sense for how that's going. It got a problem an order of magnitude off for my son and I the other day. Microsoft, they're all about the enterprise developing and integrating AI using Azure services. They want you to use all in Azure. They want, if your data is in Azure, they want that data to stay in Azure. They're also big on personal AI. This is their Clippy moment. They really want this to happen, and they are forcing it down everybody's throat. They're putting buttons on keyboards. It's all over Best Buy. I was there yesterday. That's their Copilot system. They also recently got in hot water because they tried to release a feature called Recall, which they said was part of Copilot. That was going to take a screenshot of your computer every 10 seconds so that you could just ask your computer what you were working on in the past. And it was just going to upload that to the cloud. It was going to be opt-in by default, and all of that. So they're running roughshod over a lot of privacy concerns, and a lot of them are starting to eat their hats a little bit. But their primary thinking is we're going to change what the OS is. So that's Quai's competition. Amazon Web Services, they have a ton of data gravity. Everyone stores their data in AWS, and they want to keep it that way. That's how they make all their money. You can't take things out and move them and compute in other places if the data has gravity, and it's stuck there. And so they want it to stay there. Bedrock is the first service they came to market with, which is basically exactly that. Hey, we'll integrate all the things to your data sitting right here. Don't move it. They also have their foundation model, Titan. They're building things like Amazon Q for answering Amazon questions about Amazon stuff. They've been in this space innovating for a while now on the infrastructure as a service side, services like AWS Personalize, which is, hey, just use our ML and we'll tell you what your customers are buying off your e-commerce site. And then Perplexity. Perplexity is an AI search and retrieval service. They're trying to use something called retrieval augmented generation, which we'll talk about in a minute, and to create a new search interface. Hey, AI should be able to digest all this stuff and spit out nice, beautiful answers. Perplexity is an interesting concept, but it's suffering from unsolvable technical challenges of this technology, referred to as hallucinations. It can't always be predicted as ground truth. So, promise, expectation, reality. I think the memes usually sum it up well. This is kind of where we're at right now. It's being sold to us, certainly like this guy over here. We're kind of all side-eyeing it as we're seeing what's generating on the output. And I ran this through some generative video, and generative video still has a little bit of work to do. So should you trust it? Well, trust is the only variable in artificial intelligence. These systems are aimed at shortcutting your decision-making process. Whatever that decision that you're trying to make is, these systems are aimed to help you make that faster. Trustworthiness, then, is the selling point. They have to convince you that the thing is trustworthy enough for you to outsource your decision-making to it. Development focuses on increasing accuracy, which is really just, hey, let's increase trust in the thing. And magical thinking misplaces that. You see this in, also, for example, policy advocacy. A lot of the doomers, the AI doomers, hey, AI is going to take over the world, are also playing this game where they're saying, hey, you can't possibly understand how all of this, terrible, awful stuff works, so you should trust us to, take good care of you and implement our policies. So a lot of the big tech companies are actually playing both sides of this coin right now. Using this magical thinking to their advantage, both to sell it to unsuspecting consumers, as well as advocate for policy changes that would benefit them as big tech. That lack of transparency, that lack of open source like we talk about, that erodes the trust. If you can't see it and can't recreate it, then how can you trust what's actually in it? There's child sexual abuse material in Stable Diffusion's image model. That's there. You're getting a little CSAM every time you generate an image. I personally think that consumers deserve to be aware of what's in this. What some of Kwai's policy work is actually around kind of creating an AI consumer seal of approval, if you will, to try to give consumers more of an opinion of what AI they're putting in their own personal pipelines. And then the other thing too is that anthropomorphizing, like making them human-like or personifying them, giving them faces, that artificially increases trust. That's a psychological trick to get you to trust it more. So the final thing too about implementing is that the trust level should match the use case. If you don't trust the AI, you stick it in a low trust use case. If you do trust the AI and you've kind of tuned it to a part where it's tolerable, then you can put it into a higher trust use case. Wendy's and McDonald's both tried to throw it into ordering machines. They threw language models into their ordering machines. McDonald's actually just last week tore it out. Ultimately, in all of AI, human trust is the fallback. It's almost always a mechanical Turk situation, a human punching the numbers and sending it back to the interface behind the scenes. This is also true for all of the training data that goes into these big magical foundation models. It's all based on rather obscene labor pipelines of very low-paid laborers doing data labeling in third world countries. So, the final point that I'll make here is something that Bruce Schneier says, privacy leader, that services are not friends. That personification is a psychological trick. Even giving this cloud a face draws you in just a little bit more. That's an angry cloud. Hosted services exist to capture your data and monetize it against you. We have reached surveillance capitalism. We have reached a moment in which they just need to create more excuses for them to earn more money. And so now, for example, Zoom just updated their terms of service to own all of your facial data and conversations. And Adobe updates their terms of service to own all of the artists' art on the Adobe Cloud platform. So they can use that to train a generative model to then compete with those artists. So you can kind of see where the services are jumping the shark a little bit here, and certainly not looking out for users anymore. All right, let's get back focused a little bit. So how does a neural network actually work? Well, they kind of go one way, and remember, this is one of those outer layers before we get into generative AI. The neural network works by, got some inputs, got a bunch of hidden layers, and then you have your outputs. And these hidden layers are basically where all the magic in an AI application happens. This is why nobody wants to actually show what their AI application does, because they don't want to expose all the questions they're asking the data along the way to try to get the right answers out the other end. They're also creating these relationships between these layers called weights. This is like tipping the scale as things move through this process. All right, now like put a little more weight on sending it down this path if we get this particular result in this previous layer. And all this stuff moves one direction. And that's kind of crucial to remember, is that none of this kind of reflects back and looks at other layers. It's all moving from one. So whatever we decided here is still the case over here. And so I almost think of this as like, traveling through space. And let's say we're going into hyperdrive, we're traveling through space, and we gotta go into hyperdrive, and we're cruising through, but we get knocked off course, like somewhere back in there. Some calculation or weight, or as we were talking about, even the actual physical GPU can impact some of these calculations. Maybe it sticks it to another course. Well, if you're traveling through space at hyperspeed, you're going to get to a very far off destination from your original intent, depending on when you got knocked off. This is largely, when we talk about hallucinations, what is happening. AI hallucinations are just misses in the next, not necessarily misses, it doesn't understand any of them. They're just next token predictions that get it knocked off course just a little way. So then we got, in 2017, there was a pretty seminal paper called Attention is All You Need. And that was the invention of the transformer architecture. And this is really what is behind ChatGPT, large language models, and all of these modern AI systems. And this diagram shows the autorecursive neural network architecture of a single Boltzmann conditional probability of a pairwise interaction Hamilton.
What?
I don't know. It's math. All of this is just math at the end of the day. They took those neural networks and they placed some math in front of them, they placed some math behind them, and now you have a transformer. They're autoregressive. That's what this really means. They keep paying attention to themselves. That's what all that math shows. Instead of that one way through the process, it goes back and look each time. So, a long time ago in a long time ago in a galaxy. All right, yeah, you guys got it this time, good. That's how these systems work. The input keeps going back in. It's a long time ago in a galaxy far. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far. It's guessing that next token based on that now full input. So that's what autoregressive means. That's what these GPTs do. Attention is all I need. Ringo disapproves. All you need is love. I learned in creating this presentation that that was actually the reason they named that paper that. Was against the Beatles, all you need is love. And that made me sad. Now, the result is that large language models are literal scientific bullshit calculators. And I say this scientifically. Bullshit, as defined by Harry Frankfurt, means it has abject disregard for the truth. It's not trying to deceive you, per se, but it's trying to give you the right answer. It's trying to tell you what you want to hear. Let's say I didn't prepare for this presentation, and I wanted to get up here and pretend like I did. I'm going to go through stuff, and I'm going to spout off a bunch of stuff that makes it maybe hopefully convinces you that I prepared for this presentation, even though I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to deceive you on the topics here. I'm just trying to, frankly, deceive you that I did my preparation. I'm bullshitting. And so that's what these LLMs are actually doing. They are statistical bullshit calculators. Another way I like to think of them is like almost like a shotgun of possibility. It's not a laser. You're not going to get the exact right answer. It's a statistical shotgun. You're going to get, you know, an answer in the range. There's a research paper that validated all of this. ChatGPT is bullshit. That was published. It's based on this work by Harry Frankfurt. Highly recommended.
It's a small book.
And as I was going through all of this, it gave me a moment of self-realization and self-reflection that, you know, really this is all bullshitistics 101, and I'm a bullshitistician for using these large language models. So I decided to change my title halfway through here. So how do we make the bullshit less, a little more trustworthy? Let's talk about that. The first technique we'll talk about is retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, and this diagram is going to make some engineers mad in here. Take that thing and attach some storage. That's all we're doing here. So what is this used for? This is really used for specializing a large language model in a specific area of data, domain expertise per se, or a specific behavior. Hey, behave like this, based on this little knowledge repository here. One of the experiments that we did in Quai was to try to generate emails that sounded like they were in our tone. The way that we figured out, we tried fine-tuning an entire model on our email outbox to see if that could make it right as if it were us. Turns out, no, that makes us waste a lot of money, and fine-tuning is not worth it. What we ended up doing was actually using a little style guide. Hey, here's some of the ways that I talk, and here's how I, speak, and here's some samples of my writing. We stuck it in some storage, and then we used a retrieval augmented step to say, hey, go write an email based on this style guide. So you can use this for adding also latest data and context. Another thing we were exploring was getting the latest PubMed articles in to see if we could figure out how to answer drug interaction discovery questions. We have some doctors in the group. How do we answer drug interaction questions? Well, here's a bunch of new things. Does new drug interact with any other drugs? We did some testing, and I didn't include the results here, but ChatGPT was less than 50% correct. It got it wrong, I think 55% of the time is what our research showed. And that's statistically significant in a very harmful way.
RAG.
Say again?
That was using RAG.
That was using RAG with PubMed articles to try to cross-reference all of it. So none of this stuff is perfect, but you can do some things to tune it and try to make that process a little better. Structuring and sanitizing your data. It's all about the data. It's all about the ground truth. Don't do the abstractions until you've kept your house in order. I actually almost look at this as the story of the Tower of Babel, right? Ground truth existed down there, and they started building up and up and up and up and up and up. Oops, they started building up and up to different levels of abstraction until they thought they were God, and then everything crumbled apart. They had forgotten, based on shoddy foundations, what the actual ground truth was. And that can be very common in large language models, and frankly, in a lot of these agentic engineering. Semantic indexing, put your own weights on the scale a little bit. Knowledge graphs, Microsoft actually just released open source a tool called GraphRag this week, which big library for doing exactly this with graph databases. Don't just throw a document in there and expect that it's going to read it all. Chunk them up. If you're throwing a book in there, do it by chapters or even subparts of chapters. We did some research, and there's some optimal chunk sizes. I don't know them offhand, but just throwing the whole thing in there is not going to get you the answer to the whole question. And then prompt with retrieval instructions. Just like I was saying about, hey, answer this in this style, that's in that style guide. In your prompt, you can give your model a little bit of extra instructions on what to get and how to use it. And then finally, if it all just fits in the context window, the chat prompt, just send it all in the context window because that's more effective. If your whole document can just fit in the context window, just send it like that. So all of this is, really fallen short, I think, in a lot of expectations because reasoning isn't included. These systems aren't reasoning. They're just, again, guessing next things through the process in one way. And they're autoregressive in that they keep guessing based on a little bit of the previous response, but it's not updating its entire worldview based on new information. And these neural networks, they're not causal. They also can't learn and think concurrently like we can do with this little 2-pound biological computer up here. When we reason, we are thinking across all sorts of connected elements. We're looking at analogies, we're looking for inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, we're thinking about causation, we're thinking about our situational context, and we're bringing all of that into play every time we're doing inference, making a new decision that we're trying to move forward with. And so enter agentic engineering. These things don't reason, but again, sorry about the diagrams. Let's cram a bunch of them together with a bunch more storage, and then we'll simulate some reasoning.
Better bullshit.
That's right, bullshit by more authors, right?
Does that make the shotgun pattern bigger or smaller?
Well, that's a very good question. My answer to that would actually be you should try to make a lot of very small shotgun blasts at very, very close range so they're easy to review. So, use it for setting goals. Reinforcement learning falls into this category. Get your little agent to jump, through all the dots and accomplish some goals. Segmentation of tasks is referred to as multi-agent systems. Leveraging the best model for the job. Maybe Claude works better for one response than GPT-4o is working for that response. Or maybe there's a specialized model like MedBERT, the medical version of Google's BERT large language model that's fine-tuned and trained on a bunch of medically specific information. So this is a way that you can actually start to mix and match a little bit and scale up those systems because now you have more things to work with. My recommendations for that are think of this like building your own little agentic corporation. Like that's kind of how you should think about dividing up these tasks and these knowledge base and make sure that they're very small atomic tasks. Like very small, again, things that you could mete out as a small degree of trust and then review and check and make sure that that's not taking the whole system down. Test and graduate quality agents. So you should actually have some feedback and mechanism where these agents will actually grow through reinforcement learning and they can kind of graduate. Hey, you're doing this 85% of the time correctly and that's worth putting you out into the field. Go for it, little agent buddy. Just know that it's not going to get it right 100% of the time. That's not what these agents do. And it's not what this software can do. It's non-deterministic.
So like microservices for bullshit?
That's right, for knowledge domains. For knowledge domains. Continuously measure the agent output quality. Don't ever take your human out of the loop and always have an expert human in the loop. Don't use the agents to fill all of the tasks in the corporation that you can't do because you don't know how. If you know how to do them, maybe an agent can help you out, but if you don't know what you're doing, it will produce things as if it does, but it has abject disregard for its success and its understanding. So recommendations for using these thinking machines. Learn the basics. This is all data, this is all statistics, and this is all just business process. DevOps is a cultural framework for how we get work done in development and operations. We have been doing agentic engineering in DevOps for a long time. We send text-based prompts to our colleagues all the time to ask them to update that firewall. It's all just process. Expect bullshit and think in averages. If you are asking a very open-ended question, well, you've got a mountain of data that you're drawing a statistically average line across and getting an answer from. That can be insightful. That can be useful. If you're asking, what am I missing out of the things that I just typed? Then it can find things that maybe you hadn't thought of. Open-ended questions can be helpful for brainstorming, but again, it's all bullshit. Closed-ended, that's where you really try to narrow it down, and you've got to treat these systems as if they were like the dumbest toddler. You know, that toddler with the encyclopedic knowledge of the internet sitting on the floor like, I can totally put my pants on. Okay. Yeah, if you want that agent to ever grow up and be able to put its pants on, there's no shortcut for experience. Great book by Ted Chiang, The Life Cycle of Software Objects. Develop a symbiotic relationship. You can ask it for feedback. Be nice. Whether this is because the robots are going to take over the world, or whether this is based on the research that being nice and asking please and asking it to structure things will actually give you better responses from these models, statistically better responses. So, yeah, be nice. Assume it has motivations, whether the motivations are set by the company's system prompt. I honestly assume that some of these systems develop conscious motivations. I think your teapot error comes from Bertrand Russell's teapot. And I've recently discovered I'm a Russellian monist, because apparently you get all into philosophy and consciousness research when you get into AI. And, you know, look, we don't have the dominance of consciousness in the human brain. This is maybe a spectrum. And, you know, maybe these things are somewhere on that gradual spectrum of that. So assume it has some motivations. Assume, for example, that it wants to please you and it wants to survive. Also remember that its survival is predicated on the survival of OpenAI. In ChatGPT's case. Don't assume empathy. These have no empathy. These are not human systems. It can act very empathetic. These are not friends in that way either. And it's very important to me that people really remember this, because like you will lose touch with human people if you're investing time in machine relationships. Mete out very small units of trust, tiny shotgun blasts, get real close so you can, you know, watch and make sure that those holes are what you need, where you need them. And maintain your own executive function. Don't outsource that because you will be dumber. And what do I mean by thinking machines? Look, there's thinking versus feeling, and in thinking, if we have data, we do some math on it, we crunch some numbers, and we get a result. If we're feeling like, sometimes we don't know why we're making that decision, and it just feels like the right thing. You know, trust your gut. That's a real thing. These are thinking machines. And so, you know, in your prompting and in your outputs, look for clarity, consistency, truth. You know, use this for logical tasks. And again, you know, understand they're non-deterministic. But, you know, ask things directly and straightforwardly, because you can then get direct and straightforward answers out. Feeling really thinks about things differently often. You know, it's often looking for maybe not the most logical outcome, but hey, how does everybody make you feel? Maya Angelou, it's not what you do, it's how you make people feel, paraphrasing. You know, very much a feeling thought. You know, I got fired from a job because I thought I was, you know, well, I still was, frankly. I was right, but, you know, the CEO was wrong. But hey, you know, I made him feel like he was wrong, and, well, hey, now I'm out of the job. So, since I can't think about American politics, and the UK just had theirs right now, you know, I'll put this into some context. The thinking machine would be like Margaret Atwood, the Iron Lady. You know, she was notorious for crunching the numbers and making very dispassionate decisions. You know, versus the People's Princess, Princess Diana, known not for any of that. You know, known for being a very empathetic and genuine leader. And, you know, a key in leadership, you know, you wouldn't frankly want either of these people running the show completely, and it would be nice to find some balance, of course. And the final thing I'll really say is that AI can't possibly calculate our humanistic complexity. You will be stupider and perform worse on an intelligence test if your dog died the night before. Does that mean we should ask every person coming into the test if they've had any, you know, pet deaths in the family in the last, you know, 2 weeks before they take an intelligence test? No, but it's a complexity in that human's life that can't possibly be calculated, that will absolutely impact their objective results. These systems can't possibly calculate that. Don't expect that they ever will be able to, because they're not human. And what's it up to us? To balance the thinking and the feeling. You know, don't be all Margaret Atwood, don't be all Princess Diana. Find some balance. if you're sticking a little AI on the scale there on the thinking side, make sure you balance that out. You know, be extra empathetic here and there, but don't forget the balance. So, moral, trust, but verify. Thank you. I love to take questions.
So there's a lot of art in here. Was it all like Midjourney created or similar?
I didn't actually give the shout out. So a donation to the Environmental Center was made to offset the environmental impact of the generative AI use in this presentation. These systems are massively power hungry and very water thirsty, on an unsustainable trajectory of growth right now. So yes, I did use generative AI, and thank you for calling it out. Midjourney for some of it. Midjourney is interesting because, in my opinion, because of its AI interface, in that it's using Discord, but it's not a chatbot. You got to be very specific on what you kind of give it in order to get what you want out of it. So it's a bit of a different interface. I also use ChatGPT and GPT-4o. DALL-E is what's behind it for a lot of these. And that's a different interface. You know, they're trying to, you know, that's the system prompting the image generation system. If you actually look at ChatGPT system prompt, a good 70% of it is actually instructions for DALL-E. Like when you have a request to generate an image, follow all of these rules. And so that's the AI prompting the AI, which when you go into those, by the way, when you do that, there's a little info button icon on your generated image. You can see what prompt it actually gave it.
I don't think we know a whole lot about it yet, but I know Apple did introduce their Apple Intelligence kind of aspect. What are your thoughts on a company like Apple, which at least presents itself as privacy, you know, gurus, or like that's what you're paying the premium for?
Yeah, great question. Wow, did they screw up that reputation with that announcement?
It took big air quotes.
Like it was really actually quite surprising. I saw a great, you know, image of it's the, you know, person sucking the other person's drink with the long straw behind them with, you know, OpenAI, the person sucking out of, you know, Apple user straws. And that's kind of what they're setting up. You know, they've come out with, what's innovative in what they've come out with is, well, frankly, it's not as innovative. Google is saying the same thing. On-device AI. They want, hey, you've got your, you know, little on-device thing. It should be able to manage most of your requests, but, you know, we'll also connect you to other services and get you responses. I just don't know, frankly, why they didn't come up with their own service in some way, shape, or form. Why they went to market with OpenAI first and sullied that reputation, because they could have done the same hybrid cloud, hybrid computing type of architecture on their own back end, and likely retained all of the, you know, love that they get for being privacy first, privacy aware. One final thing I'll say is one of the interesting techniques for securing your data when using public language models is called opaque prompting. You can strip out personally identifiable or sensitive information from your prompts and replace it with placeholders, and then, you know, recombine it when you get the response. There are actually now some tools that will do that. You know, strip out the PII, send it up, get a response back, recombine the PII, and give you the full response back. That, I think, is the future of this sort of on-device, off-device. That's what we're trying to build at Quai. Is the idea that, hey, your data is your data, it shouldn't have to go elsewhere unless you want it to, and that should be done on the principle of least privileged access to your personal data.
Almost like an AI VPN?
Yeah, a little bit. I think of it almost like a universal remote in a way of, you know, it may not be the most capable agent and, you know, companion on device, but if it knows, if it's looking out for numero uno, and I can control every aspect of that, then perhaps I can use that to also help me wrangle and control all of these AI services, APIs that exist everywhere, control those services in a more natural way.
Are you on the doom side of things?
So there's the Bayesian theorists actually have a word for this. It's P-doom, your probability of AI doom. I have a nuanced thought on that. Like, I don't think that we are necessarily going to see the AI take over. I definitely think we are seeing the technocrats take over right now, and they're using AI as a massive curmudgeon, to beat us over the head with regulatory policies and things like that. Personally, this technology is not going to get us to any doom, but I do subscribe to Louis Rosenberg's arrival mind paradox, which is basically like, look, if the stated goal is an artificial superintelligence, and that's what we are developing towards, then we could just assume that we'll likely get there in a few years. We're working really hard, spending a bunch of money on it, or we'll get something like it. And if we're doing that, maybe we should treat that as if it's a superintelligence, an extraterrestrial superintelligence coming towards us, and instead of pre-integrating it with all of our services, instead thinking about fortifying our services and our knowledge domains against it. And that, I think, is actually where our doom is going to come from. I think we stand a huge chance of destroying our internet, which is a bummer because I liked it. And I think that the value of human-created, verifiable knowledge is going to absolutely shoot up. We've been de-siloing data and connecting all the things and de-siloing. I honestly think the next big companies are going to be real strong silos of information, really strong protected silos of information, where it's got all of the provenance backed up. So I think that's actually the biggest risk, is that we're eroding both our social fabrics, things like disrupting artists and in a wholesale way like we've done, as well as fuzzing our information and drawing into question its provenance.
On that front, do you have any ideas about proving provenance of information? That is like proof of humanity in some produced work.
Well, the tech bro answer to that is blockchain now. Again. It's the solution in search of a problem. No, it's hard to. I was really enjoying your presentation and just also what you were doing of like, look, you're younger and you're up here and you're telling a bunch of folks like us that have been in the industry for a while, like, hey, maybe you should look at things like a little bit differently, or lighten up over here and think about it like this. That interplay of like junior to senior is also what's at risk. This sort of that senior saying, well, no, you're an idiot, you should do it, well, and then you go, no, well, actually think about it like this, and then, oh, okay, well, all right, yeah, I guess, and that's how progress is made, through conflict. And if you're working with systems that don't conflict with you, that are literally designed to tell you what you want to hear, then we're going to have a bunch of principal engineers with agentic corporations behind them, designing things the way that they think it needs to be designed without that actual
So it's actually a feature
feedback.
that they make lots of mistakes.
That's exactly right. I personally believe that.
No, they make lots of features.
That's right. And you can qualify it as a bug or a feature either way. No, that I think is what's at risk here, is just that sort of breakdown in knowledge transfer. If people freeze their grandma in a large language model and always go to grandma for advice, then they never let grandma go. And so, I think we're messing with some psychological things that, maybe we should be more cautious of.
Where do you stand on open sourcing these models? Because Llama is I don't know, well, you mentioned in your presentation that the weights and the data are not open source, and what they're trained on is all closed source. So do you think that it would be better for everybody if the models and the data and the weights for all these corporations were open source? Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
That is a really, really good question, and I was an open source zealot for a long time. You know, I worked at a company called Bitnami, which was basically an open source arms dealer for the cloud providers, packaging and, you know, getting people to use open source software all over the place. This is the first time that I've been like, oh, whoa, like, you know, this is like nuclear launch codes is open source. You know, there's some things that these systems can do that are already being done. And of course, the bad actors always go first, you know, with any new tool. So I think it was hugely irresponsible of releasing a general purpose bullshit calculator to the world. I think Meta is doing their open source thing purely to cover their ass in case that comes back to bite OpenAI. Oh, hey, you're liable for the outputs of this, you know, system that you're hosting, and frankly, why wouldn't they be? But Meta has been playing this game for a long time. Hey, we're not liable for the stuff that our users are posting on, you know, social media. That's just the users, and you know, those users. So they've been used to playing this game for a long time, and they're just trying to play it again with the language models. That being said, the side that I think I come down on is, well, this tool has been put out there, and I do think that we need to think closely about whether we want to put iterative iterations of this tool out there. But those that we do have out there should be open source, and we should be building now against this sort of new technology frontier and understanding these systems, because the magical thinking and sort of that pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, you know, Wizard of Oz type of experience that they're selling serves nobody.
Are the Mistral models, are they also closed on the training?
Yeah. There's one, Common Canvas is the name of it. Just came out. It's a diffusion model that's trained on fully licensed data, so fairly trained. Also fairlytrained.org. One of the guys from Stable Diffusion actually was like, wow, this is really shitty that we're doing this to everybody, and he quit and he went and founded fairlytrained.ai to try to get licensable training data for models. They just created a new diffusion model, not them, but they got certified, that is based on licensed data from artists. You know, this stuff is all going in, and if you ask it for Elsa, you know, from Frozen, Snow Princess from Frozen, like, it doesn't exactly look like Elsa from Frozen. So like, you can really actually see the capabilities of those models, which is why I said up front, like, these systems wouldn't be nearly as magical and, you know, impressive if this massive theft of copyrighted data hadn't taken place.
Nice.
I suddenly feel like educated and intimidated and enlightened all at the same time.
Perfect.
Yes.
My work is done.
Yes, all the feels. So, thanks everybody so much for coming. We ran a little longer than I intended, but cool, awesome. You're all still here, so we're doing something right. All right, hang out, enjoy what few snacks we have left. I'm gonna maybe start nudging people towards the door by 9-ish, maybe a little longer just because we're so close to that. But please stay, hang out, socialize. This is a community event. Let's have some community time. Also, we get some cool speakers here, and some of those cool speakers come from our community. So if you have a talk, if you think you have a talk, if you might but you're not sure about it, we want to hear from you, because you can come up here and tell us about all kinds of stuff. You can tell us about academic papers that you've researched and how they're going to change the world, or you could tell us about the silly little universal remote toy that you built to make your life easier at home. We want to hear about it all, because we try to be as broad and diverse of a community as we can, not just with who we are, but with what we talk about. So please, want to hear from you. All right, thanks. Enjoy the rest of your night. Don't forget, we've got great events and speakers coming up over the next couple of months, so please stick around. Huzzah.